በአቢይ ይልማ ሚዲያ ተዘጋጅቶ ይቀርብልዎታል። ሳድስ ሰላም ጤናና ፍቅር ክብረትን ይስጥልን። ክብራትና ክብራን የሣድስ ቤተሰቦች እንደምን አላችሁልን? ዛሬ በሚኖረን በፕሮግራማችን ላይ በእስራኤል ኤምባሲ ነው የምገኘው። ከእስራኤል ኤምባሲ የወቅቱ ጊዜያዊ አምባሳደር ከሆኑት አክቲንግ አምባሳደር ቶመር ባር-ላቪ ጋር ቆይታ ይኖረኛል ማለት ነው። በጣም ቆንጆ ጊዜ እንደሚኖረን እርግጠኛ ነኝ። በተለይ አሁን ባለው የዓለም ጂኦፖለቲክስ ላይ ወይም ደግሞ ነባራዊ ከሆነ ፖለቲካና መሰል ጉዳዮች ጋር ቆንጆ ቆይታ አድርጌያለሁ። በተለይ በጋዛ ያለውን ጉዳይም ተመልክቶ በጣም ብዙ ጥያቄዎች አንስቻለሁ። ስለ 3ኛው የእስራኤል ቤተ መቅደስም እንደዚሁ ጥያቄዎች አንስቻለሁ። እንዲሁም ደግሞ በኢትዮጵያና በእስራኤል መካከል ስላሉ ነባራዊ ግንኙነቶች፣ ታሪካዊ አንድምታዎች ጋር እንዲሁም ከአምባሳደሩ ጋር ቆይታ አድርጌያለሁ። ከዛ ውጪ ደግሞ መጨረሻ ላይ የሚመክሩንም ነገር ይኖረናል። አብዛኛዎቹ በጣም ቆንጆ ቆይታዎች እንዲኖረን ከናንተ ጋር የሚኖረን ጊዜ መልካም እንዲሆን እጠይቃለሁ። ድንቅ ጊዜ ይሆንላችሁ። Mr. Ambassador, I'm very happy to meet you.
It's great to see you again, Mr. Abiy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm sure that I'm right to call your name Bar-Lavi.
You're right, exactly.
What does that mean?
Actually, it's interesting. It means, in Hebrew, Bar-Lavi means actually the son of a lion, like Lion of Judah.
Yeah.
So it's kind of remembering our heritage as the people of Judah and Israel. Yes.
Wow. I'm very happy, and now we will focus on the situation that's revolving around the war on Gaza. It's known that America and Israel are pages of the same coin. And what's going on in America will feel something in Israel, I believe. And these days we have heard about the assassination attempt on President Trump. Personally, what do you feel about that?
I mean, it's really, it was horrible and horrific to see that level of political violence, come to the United States, around the world. We should never have to resort to such radical actions in political debates, especially in countries, that are democratic. And, in Israel, we have our own history in the 1990s of one of our prime ministers, acting prime ministers. President Trump was former president and is now running for re-election for another term after President Biden's term, and in our case, Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated in 1995 by one of our own citizens, and it was a very traumatic moment in our society, in our political culture, and it's something that we can empathize with any nation, any country that even has attempted assassination attempts. It's horrible. It should have no place in the political environment. So, the state of Israel, we wish a quick recovery to former President Trump. I saw that he's already appeared in the media and the public. So we hope he recovers completely, and we also pray for the peace and stability of the United States that their political discussion and debate doesn't reach violent levels, and that everything goes peacefully in this election cycle.
The American policies towards Israel, it has been longer and very strong, very firm. But recently in the Gaza war, we have seen some differences between the politicians, between American government and Israel government. We see some differences, and we still see a very huge support of America towards Israel. And what's the relationship has already been established on?
I mean, I think that if we look at the history of U.S.-Israel relations, from the very day that Israel was reestablished as a state in 1948. President Truman was one of the first to give an official recognition to the new state. And I think our relations are based upon a number of principles that are not connected to the political parties, one of which is that the American people support Israel, and the United States, Congress and also the executive, they function based on a democratic system where the opinion of the people is the one that usually is leading the policy of the majority. So that we don't see a big change. The American people are still supporting Israel. Another thing, there is a strategic interest of the United States that we also see. Israel is a friendly, like-minded country in the Middle East, a very unstable region with many, let's say, threats, whether it's state actors or non-state actors, terrorism. We have cooperation on very many different fronts, whether it's defense and intelligence, whether it's economic, and even people to people. And of course, in the United States, there's also a very large Jewish community, diaspora community, which is the largest in the world outside of Israel. So that's also one of the core, pillars of the connection between our countries and our peoples. So honestly, I think that it's really the attempt to make the connection with Israel a partisan issue. I think it's not, it doesn't hold water because by and large, and you see this in both parties in the leadership, the American people and both sides of the political spectrum, maybe there's sometimes slight disagreements on certain policies and things like that, and that's okay between friends also. But overall, there is a strong, ironclad relationship and support from the United States to Israel. We've seen it throughout this war, and we believe that it will continue no matter who wins the presidential election.
The same thing, like now you have been here in Ethiopia, serving as acting ambassador of Israel in Addis Ababa. And the people in Ethiopia have got very deep relationship with Israel for 1,000 years. It's known. Now, the same support or the same relationship Ethiopians have got towards Israel must be raised here. And what do you think Ethiopian support to Israel, even during this war on Gaza? What kind of support you have got from Ethiopia?
So I think, really, like you said, the historic relationship between our peoples and our countries it really goes back 3,000 years, and it's something that is part of both our identity and our biblical heritage, as well as the people of Ethiopia, your heritage, which is also based in many ways on parts of the Bible. And even, it doesn't matter, different groups in Ethiopia, we see that there is this overall idea that Israel is like a very important country for Ethiopia, and the connection is very important. So throughout this war, I mean, look, in the end, war is bloody and it's hard and it's difficult and it's not pleasant. So sometimes we prefer not to talk about the war with our friends. But what I've experienced during my time here, and especially in the last 9 months since the beginning of the war, is that the vast majority of people that I meet here are supporting Israel. They're praying for peace in Israel and in Jerusalem, and they're hoping to see a time when Israel can get back to dealing with normal issues rather than having to fight for its continued existence. That's what I can say about the people of Ethiopia, and I think that reflects the general opinion as I see it here. Of course, there's different opinions, and we recognize that as well. But that's my experience so far.
Ethiopian people are very religious in here. We Ethiopians are going to Israel every time to visit the holiest places that we Ethiopians have been thinking and believing. That has been a very huge connection with our historical background and heritage. Then we are thinking always about spirituality too. Ethiopians are thinking about spirituality. Then one of the spiritual view of Israel is having the third temple to be established would make differences in different areas. People think that. And even in the war on Gaza, when the first Hamas leaders have raised the question about the third temple, it's a spiritual thought that at the end, every thing have got some background inside of it. So they raised the question about the third temple. If it is being built, the Al-Aqsa and every areas around that would have been hurt. People think that. What do you know about the third temple?
Okay, so that's a very interesting question. I'd say there's two levels. One is the accusation by Hamas and the other terrorist groups. It's a historic accusation. It starts even 100 years ago. Even back in 1921, 1929, also there were already riots going on in the Holy Land around this idea that was being a rumor that was being spread that the Jews are trying to destroy, here behind us, Al-Aqsa Mosque, and rebuild the temple on the Temple Mount. This is something which is it's a way that they're able to rile people up around the religious idea to channel their rage at Israel. Now, there's no truth behind it. Let me tell you a little bit about the other side of it, about what is this idea of the third temple. So historically, Israel had two temples, the Temple of Solomon, which was built by King Solomon and stood for a few hundred years, and then in 586 BCE it was destroyed by the Babylonians. Then, as we know, and also through history and the Bible, the Jewish people, the people of Israel, were exiled from the land into Babylon. We said, by the rivers of Babylon there we sat and we wept as we remembered Zion. That was a famous psalm. And then, about 50, 60 years later, the new king of Persia at the time that conquered Babylon, his name was Cyrus, he issued a decree that allowed the people to go back to whatever lands they came from. Yeah. So the people of Judea and Israel came back, mainly the tribes of Judah and Benjamin and Levi. And then at that time we rebuilt our temple. Yeah. And for a few hundred years our new temple stood there. It was then renovated by King Herod, who is mentioned also in the New Testament. Yeah. In the year 70 CE, 70 of the Common Era by the Gregorian calendar, the Romans destroyed this temple. They destroyed Jerusalem. They burned it, and the Jews were exiled once again. This was the beginning of the longer exile. Yeah. So there's been this idea throughout our second exile, first of all, of returning to our land, which we were able to do in 1948 by reestablishing our sovereignty in our homeland. And the second idea, it's more of a spiritual idea. It's this idea of rebuilding a temple. This is something that practically it has, in the view of the state of Israel, it has there's no plan or no practical application of this. This is some kind of, even some people say the state of Israel itself is like the third temple. It's like a representation of our independence in our land, and it's enough. Other people, they pray that one day when the Messiah comes, in our tradition, the Messiah, we're still waiting for him to come. So when he comes, he will rebuild this third temple. However, we know as the state of Israel, we are a Jewish and a democratic state. Yeah. We have freedom of religion for all different religions, and we protect freedom of worship for Muslims on the Temple Mount, in Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock, the two Muslim shrines that are on the Temple Mount right now. Other people are allowed to come visit, but in terms of the religious status quo, it's completely protected. There is no threat to Al-Aqsa Mosque, and there's no plan to build a temple on that area. You know, you see right behind here, the holiest part that Jews are praying at right now is this area over here, the Western Wall, which is one of the old remaining retainer walls of the ancient temple. Up above it, the Temple Mount, it is the holiest site in Judaism and for the Jewish people, but it's currently it's a Muslim site, and it's the status quo is being protected by the state of Israel. It's without a question. It's very important for us to make that clear to anyone who may have any doubts.
Wow, because that has been a very deep question, has been raised out of the Muslim communities usually, and happy to make it clearer. Now then we come to the war on Gaza, because one of the reasons that Hamas and every group have been raising is also one of the spiritual secret, is also the third temple and everything like that. And anyway, the war started. Now it has taken months, almost a year is coming, and there has been very bloodiest war ever, and very distractions have already been happened, and war is all the time is not good, but has already been going on through. Then first, personally, what do you feel about the war on Gaza, and what kind of things you have got in your heart?
Okay, I think first of all it's important to frame. It's I don't see this as a war on Gaza. It's a war. Between Israel and Hamas. And until October 6th of last year, October 6th, 2023, there was a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. What we didn't know at the time was that on October 7th, Hamas had planned to carry out this massive invasion of Israel and massacre of Israeli civilians, rape, kidnapping of people, murdering and burning families. This was their plan, and they carried it out by infiltrating with 3,000 terrorists and other people who came to also loot and rape and things like that. And they broke this ceasefire. Now, I don't know what they were expecting would happen after they conducted this massive invasion of Israel. But they couldn't have expected that Israel would just sit and say, "Oh well, we will just continue to take your attacks." They opened this war on October 7, 2023, and since then Israel has been engaged in a campaign to topple the Hamas regime in the Gaza Strip, so that when this war ends, Hamas will not be the rulers in Gaza. Hamas is a vicious, brutal terrorist organization based on messianic religious ideas that are completely extreme and radical and are dedicated to our destruction. Second thing, we're dedicated in this war to return all of our hostages being held by Hamas and its allies in Gaza. And third, to make sure that there's no military threat that will be coming out of Gaza when this war ends. Yeah. So whoever will rule in Gaza after the war is over, it won't be Hamas, and it won't be an actor that will threaten Israel with terrorism and attack. Now, it is important to note, as you said, war is horrible. War is very, very difficult. You know, war should always be the last resort for any kind of dispute. And Israel, officially, and also if you ask any Israeli, they agree with that, because we've experienced war off and on for 76 years since our establishment. These are even our soldiers now who are also dying during this war, and our people who are dying from the war. And so we have no wishes of destruction on the people of Gaza. We have the goal of destroying Hamas and its regime, its terror regime. And the problem, again, with Hamas is that because they are this kind of, they have a death cult mentality, they are hiding amongst civilians. They've embedded themselves. They took power in the Gaza Strip in 2007. They were elected in 2006 with a plurality of seats in the Palestinian parliament. But then in 2007, they took over Gaza by force and kicked out all of their political opponents. And it's important to note also that this was 2 years after Israel completely withdrew from Gaza. We pulled out all of our civilians and all of our soldiers from the Gaza Strip. We gave it to the Palestinians. The Palestinians did what they did, and Hamas took control in 2007. Now, over the last 17 years, Hamas has been ruling over Gaza, and they've turned it into a completely like a terror base, a militarized area where the terrorist infrastructure is embedded within the civilian infrastructure. They have over 700 kilometers of tunnels underneath the Gaza Strip, underneath schools, underneath residential buildings, underneath mosques. They have also, in addition, they've used billions of dollars of aid that has come from the international community and also from countries like the Islamic Republic of Iran to arm themselves, both by smuggling in weapons and by building weapons locally in Hamas. This is thousands and thousands of rockets and of other types of even more advanced weaponry. There's UAVs. We just the other day actually, and this is actually one of the most one of the saddest and most I guess disappointing parts of what we've noticed while we've been in Gaza over the last 9 months is the extent to which they were even using UN agencies and infrastructure. For example, the UN RWA, UNRWA, it's an organization that was founded after Israel's War of Independence in 1948 to deal with the issue of Palestinian refugees, because following the war, there were hundreds of thousands of Palestinians who had left their homes during the war, hoping to come back after Israel, in their eyes, would not have been created. But when the war was done, Israel was there, and since then they've been used as a pawn by the Arab world and parts of the international community. This UN organization, UNRWA, was established to help them, but actually what it has done, it's perpetuated their status of being refugees. And more than that, we've noticed and we've realized over the last few months that in Gaza, a large number of UN, RWA, UNRWA employees were actually Hamas members. Some of them were part of the military wing. There were even school principals from UNRWA schools who participated in the October 7th attack. There were UNRWA employees who were holding hostages during this war. Just the other day, in the UNRWA headquarters in Gaza City, our forces had to invade and take over the headquarters because they saw that there were groupings of terrorists that were reorganizing there. And when we got inside, we saw that there were weapons being stored there. There was UAVs and attack drones that were being manufactured there. There was a weapons lab under UNRWA. A few months ago, under this same building, we found one of the key intelligence centers of the Hamas terrorist organization with servers and everything that were getting their electricity from the main building of UNRWA. So this is something that's really disappointed us even more and been even more shocking, although we knew that UNRWA wasn't, let's say, the most beneficial organization in the end, but the extent of the collaboration that was going on between these terrorists in Gaza and a UN agency. So the situation in Gaza is difficult, and the situation when you have civilians as human shields, it's very unfortunate. And every civilian who is killed, Israel doesn't have any interest in killing civilians. We have, aside from the fact that morally we don't want to kill women and children, it's completely horrific. Also, if you look at it just practically, in terms of international image and opinion, why would we be trying to harm innocent people? We're trying to harm the military infrastructure and the Hamas terrorists. And if you look at it, Israel has been doing actually quite a good job. If you look at it, if you take out the emotional aspect and the pictures that some of our adversaries are constantly spreading. By the way, some pictures are being taken from other conflicts like in Syria, but some are indeed from Gaza. If you look at in 9 months of fighting, we have managed to kill in our estimates, over 15,000 Hamas terrorists and Islamic Jihad terrorists. The Islamic Jihad is another terrorist group that's fighting there. Even the UN numbers of the dead in Gaza, the UN and the international media, they use the numbers that are being fed to them by Hamas, by either the Hamas Information Office, the Gaza Government Information Office, or the Health Ministry of Gaza. Both bodies are controlled by Hamas. If we look just a couple of months ago, the UN itself revised its estimates in the beginning of May. They lowered their estimates by 10,000 because they said 10,000 are unconfirmed. So it's hard to say, and every civilian that's killed, it's a tragedy. So I don't want to get stuck on this about how many civilians and how many people, but it's just important to note Israel is holding ourselves to a high standard, and it's not because of the world is focused on us. It's because we have a high level of morality in our military and in our policymakers who are planning these operations.
Yeah.
So that's what I'd like to say regarding those points.
I understand. And we watch on TVs the destruction of the city of Gaza. And of course, you have mentioned it, the killings of children and innocent civilians too. You have already expressed it out in your interview last. But when we see those destructions of Gaza, what the next thing and real establishment of Gaza will be the next question, because it seems highly distracted. So, what do you think the Israel government's plan, complete plan in Gaza, and what is the final destination of the plan getting inside of Gaza? Like you can mention the Rafah invasion and the rest of the Gaza and controlling the whole things over there and taking part of the war. And what is that?
First of all, I'd like to say that Hamas has brought this destruction upon themselves. It was very easy for them to stop this war. First of all, they could have not attacked on October 7th.
Yeah.
After October 7th, there were just two things. They can just give up their weapons and give up the hostages, and that's it. The war is over. However, they prefer, and they've said this also in interviews in Qatar and in other in channels around the world, that for them it doesn't really matter how many Palestinian civilians die. For them, they're all being martyrs for the cause, and so they're willing to sacrifice everyone just to reach their genocidal goal, which their genocidal goal is the destruction of Israel. Now, this is the tragedy of the situation. Israel, as I said, we have our war goals, which is the removal of Hamas and the return of the hostages. Now, what happens the day after, right? That's what you've been asking.
Yeah.
In our vision for the future, Israel will not have a long-term presence as the body that's, let's say, governing Gaza. We don't want to occupy the Gaza Strip. We were there 20 years ago. We left, and we want to leave it in the end to the people living there. However, the body that's governing there needs to be one that is not posing a threat militarily to Israel. And so there have been many ideas that were floated, whether some moderate let's say, clans within the Gaza Strip, or some international kind of constellation involving maybe some international organizations, Western countries, and also some actors from the Arab world. These are all under some sort of discussion. But it's important to know we have no claims. We don't want to stay in Gaza. What we do want is to root out the terrorism in Gaza and to bring back our people. So that's our vision for the day after. Now, in general, what's our vision as Israel? Since 1948, Israel has had one major goal in terms of its relations with our neighbors, and that is to survive as an independent state in our land. And it's if our neighbors recognize us, really recognize us and our right to be there, and when we are able to trust them that they won't be attacking us all the time, then after that everything can be agreed upon and decided upon with different kinds of, let's say, concessions, things like that. In the end, every time that we have come to the table to, let's say, to have peace talks and a peace agreement, we've succeeded, let's say, with the Egyptians, with Egypt, with Jordan. We had the Abraham Accords with the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco. There was even a process starting with Sudan. But with, let's say, our immediate neighbors, the Palestinians, our only serious wish is for them to recognize us and to recognize an end of the conflict. And unfortunately, none of their leaders have been able to come to that step where they're willing to say, this is an end of the conflict, we have no more claims against Israel. And until that day happens, we unfortunately will not be able to have a real, let's say, long-term peace. Right now, we're trying to reach something of a stable situation with Gaza, but we still are, hoping for the day when our neighbors will be able to recognize us, Israel, as the Jewish democratic state, and as a state that has a right to exist on that land.
And some say Israel's next plan after Gaza could have been destroying Hezbollah, and the rest the Israel think are terrorists. And that could really arise another all-out war around that area, and people get afraid of that, and the war with Iran, and that could escalate another big war in the area. People could think that. And the biggest question is also war with Hezbollah. It could come up with very big destruction in the area. People think that. And still, there are some news where we have heard of escalation between Hezbollah in the northern part of Israel. What do you think about that?
So this is a very important question, because since October 7th, we were talking about Hamas and Islamic Jihad, but in the end, on October 8th, Hezbollah had already joined this war. Hezbollah started to attack Israel in the north, both by rockets and attack drones and UAVs, and also with shootings and anti-tank missiles that were shot at both our military personnel and at civilians. And Hezbollah is a part of a larger regional framework. Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, and then we have the Shiite Iraqi militias in Iraq. We have the Houthis in Yemen, who have been attacking shipping and attacking Israel from the south. And we have let's say, the head of the snake, in our view, which is the Iranian regime. Now, Iran has been directing all of these attacks from the back, and honestly, it's not only from the back. It also, if we look at 3 months ago, on April 14th, Iran launched over 300 ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and also attack UAVs at Israel in a direct attack against another country. Now, fortunately, the vast majority of those were shot down by us and our allies and other partners, both from the Western world and also from the region itself. So we were able to stave off that attack. We still reserve the right to respond to the Iranian aggression in a way and in a place that we find to be necessary and appropriate. But the Iranian regime has been directing Hezbollah from October 8th to attack our people from the north. And Hezbollah has an arsenal of hundreds of thousands of missiles. In 2006, there was a war between Israel and Hezbollah. It was called by many the Second Lebanon War. Now, it happened in the summer of 2006, 18 years ago. And at the end of this war, there was a Security Council resolution, 1701. It was unanimously accepted by the United Nations Security Council. And what did this resolution say? It said that Israel withdraws from southern Lebanon, and in return, Hezbollah has to disarm and move 20 kilometers north of the border, north of what's called the Litani River in southern Lebanon. Now, Israel did withdraw from that area. However, Hezbollah, in the last 18 years, has only continued building its arsenal and has only entrenched itself deeper into the area of southern Lebanon, right on the border with Israel. There's a big threat that comes from this because the situation that we saw on October 7th with Hamas invading Israel and actually conquering even parts of our territory for a certain time, that can happen on a much larger scale with Hezbollah. Hezbollah has been preparing its commando forces called the Red One Force. They have thousands of these terrorists who are ready to invade Israel, massacre our civilians, capture our towns and cities in the Galilee. You know, I'm sure most Ethiopians have heard of the Galilee region from the Bible. And this is the region that's under attack right now through Hezbollah. Almost 7,000 rockets and other projectiles have been shot at Israel from the beginning of this war, just from Lebanon, from Hezbollah. Now, we've also evacuated close to 80,000 people from their homes, of our people, from the towns, cities, and villages on the border with Lebanon. These people we need them to be able to return to their homes, and in order to do that, we need to achieve a sense of stability and security on the border. So our goal is to have Hezbollah basically adopt, or force Hezbollah to adopt Resolution 1701, which is an international norm. It was accepted by the world to move away from our border and to start to give up its weapons and have an appropriate, let's say, monitoring mechanism, maybe an international mechanism, which will return the stability to southern Lebanon and northern Israel.
But do you think that would happen? The agreement, like to the Hezbollah to take that part?
Let's say that we are exhausting all of the diplomatic possibilities and we're trying to reach a diplomatic solution. You know, Iran, because it's controlling the strings here. So this is why we're also calling for, in addition to their other aggression, but we're calling for a renewal of harsh sanctions on Iran, and to force them to make Hezbollah to stop its aggression. Now, if we are not able to reach these goals in a diplomatic way, then unfortunately, it may be possible that Israel will be forced into another war, into another front in this ongoing war. And in that case, Hezbollah will bring a high level of destruction upon the people of Lebanon. And I think that is something that they should really be worried about. And if, given that Hezbollah, it even has many seats in the Lebanese government, in the parliament, given that they care about the country which they claim to represent and to be fighting for, they should really think about how this situation will develop, because currently it's not looking so good for any of us. Again, we don't want to enter into a war, but we have to protect our citizens, and we have to return the quiet to our northern region, as we are trying to do to our southern region.
People would talk about if the Gaza people, or the Palestinians have been created as as a government or that by their own government, if they are recognized as states, the area could become peaceful. And Hezbollah, if it becomes peaceful in Lebanon and everything like that, do you think all the peace in the area would have happened? And still the Iran government has got a new elect, and that looks mediating. Do you think all the things getting together would create a peace in the area, longer peace?
First of all, it's important to note that it's important to emphasize that any kind of an imposition of, let's say right now, let's say that the world recognizes now a Palestinian state.
As a government, as a state.
Yes. This would mean that Hamas has just won all of the legitimacy that it ever needed, because how did they get this state? They got it because they attacked Israel on October 7th, started this horrific war, and this becomes their war of independence. So we can't allow this to happen, because this only provides additional support to the most extreme factions in the Palestinian political sphere, and also across the Middle East and I dare say the Muslim world as a whole, because they see then that you are able to conduct these barbaric attacks against innocent people. You know, there was this party, the Nova Music Festival. 2 weeks ago, I was in Israel for a few days, and I made it a point to go down and visit the site of this Nova Music Festival. At this site, 360 young people, young men and women, were murdered, massacred, women were raped, and over 40 people were kidnapped from this music festival site. You walk there on the site of where these people were killed. There's pictures standing like these rods with pictures of each one of the victims, and you get chills, because there was a huge massacre took place on this site. You know, the terrorists, they came across, they saw these people, they just started killing everyone they saw they could lay their hands on. This kind of act will gain legitimacy if the Palestinians achieve statehood as a result of these actions. So we cannot support any kind of providing additional legitimacy right now to the Palestinians as a state, because it just provides more support for the radicals. Now, in addition, you can ask maybe the Palestinian Authority, which is currently ruling in the West Bank, in the areas that we call Judea and Samaria. So, unfortunately, their leadership has also not condemned the attack of October 7th. We know that there were even some members of the Fatah political movement, which is the leading movement of the Palestinian Authority, who took part in these attacks from Gaza. They continue to pay terrorists who have committed horrific attacks against Israelis and are sitting in Israeli prisons, or even the ones who are not alive anymore. They pay their families as kind of a support for their actions. And these kinds of rejectionist bodies, we cannot prop them up. We need a true moderate force with which Israel can deal. Otherwise, it'll just lead to more chaos. Now, if you're asking about additional actors, you said the moderation of Hamas, the moderation of Hezbollah. It's important to note that these movements are not, their whole point is not to be moderate or to moderate. Hamas had 17 years as a governing body in the Gaza Strip. They could have made it into a Singapore. You know, there was a lot of international aid and investment that could have been going in. The aid was going in, the investment they needed to provide the opportunities for, but they were using the aid to just entrench their genocidal ideology and their military capabilities into the Gaza Strip. And their interviews since October 7th have proven that they have no desire for a positive civilian situation in Gaza, because they said they're willing to sacrifice all of the people and that they want to give the responsibility to, I said one of the leaders of Hamas said, it's the UN's responsibility to deal with the civilians. So So we believe, we know that based on previous experience, Hamas cannot be moderated. By the way, in previous eras when we had peace talks with other factions in the Palestinian political environment, Hamas were the ones who went and began suicide bombings to try and derail those peace talks. Now, in Hezbollah, we need to also look at what the purpose of Hezbollah is. Now, sure, you can say that they have a military wing and they also have like their political wing in the parliament, in the Lebanese parliament. They're a part of Lebanese society. But they were founded by the Iranian Revolutionary Guards as a proxy force to advance a military agenda against Israel. And they have also stated that they will not finish, they will not be satisfied until Israel ceases to exist. This is the way that the Iranian regime, it doesn't matter, you mentioned right now their new leadership, it doesn't matter who the president is, because in the end, the control sits with the supreme leader, with Khamenei. And the whole reason for being of the Islamic Republic of Iran is to advance this revolutionary agenda throughout the world, of what they see as some kind of, their version of a messianic vision. And this vision, it depends on the destruction of Israel. And we're the little Satan. The great Satan is the United States and the countries of the West. So they plan to extend their tentacles and their influence throughout the world. So we view the current, whoever the president might be, maybe he's a little bit more moderate on some issues internally, but we've seen that with previous presidents of Iran that were also considered by the international community to be moderate, the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, led by the supreme leader, were still causing chaos and terror and sowing it throughout the Middle East and throughout the world.
I'm very happy, we have been discussing all the things, but finally, I just want to allow you to have any expression you have towards this war and the Ethiopian support to Israel and Israel's greatest achievement in Eastern Africa, like in the Horn of Africa, everything, because we need the greatest peace in the area. We also need to go in peace to Israel, to visit the holiest places. Every Ethiopian need that. We pray for the greatest peace in the area. So finally, what do you want to say about all the things?
Okay, first of all, I'd like to say that I don't think I mentioned this enough, but we still have 120 hostages that are being held in Gaza out of 250 that were kidnapped in the beginning of this war. We are working to get them back, and there's even some optimism right now about potentially having some kind of an agreement. And of course, Israel is taking that very seriously, and we have expressed the current agreement that's on the table, which was endorsed also by President Biden and was agreed to by Israel. It involves the return of a maximum number of living Israeli hostages, while still allowing Israel the window of let's say, of being able to act against Hamas in the future, because we cannot, in the end, agree to something that leaves Hamas as surviving as the government and the leading force in Gaza. So that's one thing. So we're praying for the return of the hostages, and I know that many Ethiopians are standing with us on this matter. I have a pin right here, the yellow pin, which we're wearing until we get all of them back. Now, if we're talking, I think the Ethiopian people, they also know what it's like to be in states of conflict and in turbulence, and I think that they understand, as we understand, that the best situation is a situation of peace, internal peace, external peace, to be able to focus on the things that actually will advance our lives economically, spiritually, and all of these different things. So Israel is fighting for our existence and our stability and our security. there's still, even today, there's visitors from Ethiopia and from other countries around the world and across Africa who are coming to Israel on pilgrimages, seeing different sites, because there's areas of Israel that are still stable. Yeah. And we hope that all of Israel will be stable soon, and also all of Ethiopia. So that's one. That's our wish for the people of this country and for our relationship with them. Now, if we refer to Israel's engagement in general with Africa, with East Africa, I think, aside from all of the biblical stories, we also have the modern times. And in the modern times, there's a few important milestones that I'd like to talk about. First of all, the founder of modern Zionism, which is the movement, the liberation movement that brought the Jewish people back to our homeland, his name was Theodor Herzl. And he wrote in one of his famous books, he wrote that once he's done liberating his people, the people of Israel, the Jewish people, he wants to become involved in the liberation of the peoples of Africa. And I think we see this in the history of many of the post-colonial movements and different movements across Africa and also in the Western world of, let's say, African Americans, that they found some inspiration even and some connections with the Jewish struggle, the Zionist struggle, and the struggle of the post-colonial African states. If we look at, starting in the mid-50s, Israel was established, the modern state of Israel, in 1948, and in the first few years, we were figuring out how our diplomatic situation would be around the world. And starting from the mid-50s, we began a very big push to connect with the newly emerging independent states of Africa. Now, Ethiopia was one of the first because Ethiopia was always independent, and we have this historic relationship. And of course, at the time with the emperor, who from the Solomonic dynasty, there was a very strong connection. So we started with Ethiopia, but we expanded throughout the continent. And I think this period of under our foreign minister at the time, Golda Meir, who was a future prime minister, it was really the blossoming of the ties between Israel and Africa, where Israeli experts and companies that had been developing Israel then moved into Africa to help and build some of the the big infrastructure projects that were here. Now it's other countries that are dealing with that, but back in the day it used to be Israelis. Dealing with, let's say, agriculture, with helping to build up the armed forces for these newly independent states to be able to protect themselves, and other such mechanisms of state building. Now, in modern times, Israel is also very active in Africa. We have many experts, companies, and NGOs that are working in Ethiopia and East Africa and throughout the continent on issues, for example, regarding agriculture. We're sharing technologies in, let's say, advanced seed technologies for agriculture that's able to produce some more fruit and vegetables and things like that. Irrigation technologies with drip irrigation that was developed in Israel, and wastewater treatment. For some countries, what's relevant is desalination, creating drinkable water from the sea. We have also, in the modern context, for example, medical technologies, and there's many projects of Israeli doctors and Israeli medical med tech companies that are very active in Ethiopia and throughout the continent. Here in Ethiopia, we have delegations that come of physicians from different hospitals in Israel to do knowledge sharing with their colleagues here in Ethiopia, and also conduct some, let's say, concentrated operations and things like that. There's of course, the entrepreneurship and startup sector of innovation. This we're very active here in Ethiopia and in other countries, but if we focus on Ethiopia, the innovation ecosystem here has been really growing in the last few years under the partnerships between the UNDP here and some major government ministries, Ministry of Innovation and Technology, Ministry of Labor and Skills, and even the Prime Minister's office. And Israel has been a key partner in that effort because, as you may know, Israel is considered the startup nation because we were able to kind of build this ecosystem of entrepreneurship in our country. So we're always very eager to continue sharing, let's say, our experience and building these partnerships with countries around the continent. And we hope that people understand this, that, for example, our connection with, on a bilateral level, should also be recognized on a continental level.
Yeah.
Here in Addis Ababa, the seat of the African Union, we think this is very important to continue building off of these connections and to and for our partners in Africa to continue coming to the table so that we can strengthen our bonds.
And finally, two questions together. One, before you came, what kind of image did you have to Ethiopia, and after you have come here, what kind of image you have already developed? And second question, if I let you have 4 advice for Ethiopia, 4 or 3 advice, what do you say or what do you advise Ethiopians? At least 3 or 4.
Okay.
So 2 questions together.
Okay. Let me think. Okay. First of all,
what kind of image did you have to Ethiopia?
Let's talk about Ethiopia. Yes.
Yeah.
So, let's say when I started here almost exactly 1 year ago. I started my tenure here in Addis Ababa. I actually had been to Addis twice before on certain, even 3 times on short work visits. So I had a little bit of a background dealing with Ethiopia. However, we hear the stories about Ethiopia is like this partner of Israel, like its historic partner. Everyone in Israel knows this. That's why people are so eager to start. If they want to do business in Africa, they always start with Ethiopia. But when you come here and you talk to the people, you meet people of different backgrounds, and almost always there's this kind of, when they find out that I'm from Israel, there's this kind of warmth that develops. It's some people call it our second country. Some people call it, that we're brothers. In different ways, it's very much expressed, even in the names of people. Jerusalem, Bethlehem, all of these things. It kind of brings home the connection between us.
Yeah.
I'd say also, I think Ethiopia is a very special country because on the one hand, it's very diverse. It's made up of, I've heard something like 80 different ethnic groups and languages, and it has a really long history. And this is something that for people who have some experience with African countries, it's different from anything else that we've ever seen.
Yeah.
And it's its own kind of civilization. Yeah. And I think realizing that by being here, it adds so much content and so much of a special feeling around what's going on and around the connections that we need to build and continue building with the country and the people. That's one thing. So if you're looking at a few, let's say, suggestions or advice that I...
3 advice for
3 advice. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, first, I think this is very clear, and I think we've kind of spoken about it by now, but, I really, really hope and pray that Ethiopia can find peace. Ethiopians can find peace amongst themselves, amongst each other. Because of our deep and strong relationship with this country, it's so sad to see when different people in Ethiopia are are fighting against each other or are arguing against each other. It's something which we really hope can be resolved soon, and that peace and stability can come to this country as it should come also to our country as well.
So we need peace first.
Peace.
Advice.
Peace is the first
Second advice.
Second advice. Let's say, I think that there's some challenging situations here, and we and we understand that. But one of our goals is to promote business and to promote economic cooperation between Israel and Ethiopia. And we very much are trying to do that with many different companies that are interested. Sometimes we find that there are some challenges, let's say bureaucratic challenges or economic challenges here that make it more difficult for companies
to come here
exactly
and invest.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I believe that by addressing some of those issues, that Ethiopia can actually attract much more foreign direct investment and more collaboration with with companies from around the world.
Yeah.
For us, this is very important. I think it's a mutually beneficial kind of goal to have.
Still much important to Ethiopia.
Yes. So this is my second piece of advice, is to take a look maybe at some of these some barriers and some ways that you can improve the business climate for the foreign investors to come here.
The third.
The third.
Yeah, very entertaining question, because you see, I think you would advise us on our ancient nature and the way that we accept the modernization. All the things must be in parallel and must be kept in a very good way. I think the third advice might go that way, but I don't know how you express it.
Let's say, thank you for steering me in a certain direction.
Yeah.
I think I agree with you that. Let me first look just a couple of words about Israel, right? In Israel, we are an ancient nation, and yet we're also a modern nation.
Yeah.
We're ancient because our heritage is really dating back thousands of years. Our people, when they were in the diaspora, they kept that heritage with them, and they always prayed and hoped that one day they would come back to their homeland and become independent again. We were able to realize that 76 years ago, 1948.
Yeah.
And since then, we have had to, let's say, keep that ancient heritage with us, but also to develop very quickly in a modern way. And so if Israel wouldn't have been able to, let's say, harness new technologies and think on its feet and do things very quickly, then we wouldn't be around anymore, because we would have been probably either have been starving by now because there's not much food security, let's say, without the agricultural technologies, or we would have been attacked and destroyed by our neighbors because we weren't thinking enough on our feet.
Yeah.
So in Israel, we've learned to use the human capital that we have. And I think one of the amazing things about Ethiopia is that along with your ancient heritage and your modern statehood, you have also an incredible amount of human capital.
Yeah.
This human capital can be measured, first of all, in numbers.
Yeah.
120, 130 million people. I'm not sure what the updated number is. That's one thing. Another thing is that due to this kind of ancient identity, your people are able to expand their horizons, because when you have, let's say, 3,000 years going back, you can also think 3,000 years going forward. And I think in times of turbulence, sometimes it can bring out also the best in people. We see that in Israel, and I think we can also see it here in Ethiopia. People who are thinking about the betterment of the country, the quick development of the country in different spheres and sectors, economically, agriculture, food security, climate. We have, of course, the peace issues, but that's a part of it. And in the end, we all, and we understand the government here wants the same thing. We all want a stable, prosperous, developed, and peaceful Ethiopia. And I think that utilizing your ancient heritage with also this perspective of looking forward. And you know, we're happy to be there to help and talk about these things moving forward. So with that, I think that we can see a really bright future for Ethiopia and for the relationship between Ethiopia and Israel.
Wow, Mr. Ambassador Tomer Bar-Lavi, really, I'm very happy to meet you here. And there could be another time also to discuss about any related things between the relationship between Ethiopia and Israel and everything related to that, and for your clarity about the war in Gaza and Israel's plan in Gaza and everything. And we have already been talking longer and very deep about the current geopolitics situation in Israel and area. And I just want to say thank you for everything, that for your stays. I'm really happy to meet you back again.
Thank you very much, Abiy. It was a pleasure, and I look forward to continuing our ongoing conversation.
Really, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. እንግዲህ ክብራትና ክብራን ቤተሰቦቼ በጣም ጥሩ ቆይታ እንደነበራችሁ እርግጠኛ ነኝ። ፕሮግራሙንም እንደወደዳችሁት እርግጠኛ ነኝ። ሌላ ጊዜ ባነሳላችሁ ብላችሁ የምትጠይቁት ወይ የምትፈልጉት ጥያቄዎች ካላችሁ እንግዲህ ለማስተናገድ ዝግጁ እንሆናለን። ስለዚህ ከአምባሳደር ቶመር ባር-ላቪ ጋር ሌላ ጊዜ ጥሩ ቆይታ እንዲኖርን ከፈለጋችሁ ጥያቄዎችን ኢንቦክስ አድርጉልን። ከስር በኢንቦክስ በሜሴጅ ላይ መላክ ትችላላችሁ፣ ማስቀመጥ ትችላላችሁ። እነዚህን ሐሳብ አስተያየቶቻችሁን በጠቅላላ ሰብስቤ ደግሞ ሌላ ጊዜ ተመልሰን እንመጣለን። ቆይታው መልካም እንደነበረ አምናለሁ። መልካም ጊዜ ይሁንላችሁ። ዕውቀት ታላቁ እግዚአብሔርን ታከብራለች።
በአቢይ ይልማ ሚዲያ ተዘጋጅቶ ይቀርብልዎታል። ሳድስ